This is Studio 809.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast. I'm your host, Hiking Bob Falcone. You can find me on my website at hikingbob.com, which is links to my social media, my columns at they used to call it the Colorado Springs Independent. Now it's 6035media.org. Also, my other podcast, my photography website. And you can also drop me a line if you have a suggestion, a topic that you'd like to hear discussed, or a guest you'd like to hear me have on board here, or anything like that, or sign up for my newsletter. You can do all that stuff at hikingbob.com. And don't forget, if you'd like to support this podcast, you can do that at Patreon, patreon.com/hikingbob. And depending on your level of support, you can also get a reward every month for doing that. So check all that stuff out, hikingbob.com. Today, I have a very special guest. It's been a while working on this because, well, it's a federal agency, and federal agencies being what they are, it is what it is. But we're happy to have Carl Bauer here, who is the ranger for the Pikes Peak Ranger District of the Pike National Forest. Do I have all that right?
You got that perfect. Thank you.
Carl, thank you for being here.
You bet.
I appreciate it. You've been here for about a year. Is that right?
Yep, I got here last May.
Okay.
Right before the snowstorm.
Okay, so just under a year. Let's go back. You're the ranger for a pretty big ranger district next to a pretty big city.
You bet. No, first of all, I am just completely honored to be chosen for this position. It is highly sought after in the Forest Service, I think, and it's a job that I take really seriously. And it's been a dream come true, honestly.
Cool. So let's go back and start. A lot of people may not know you because, you're new, relatively new here. I didn't want to hit you up right when you first got here. I figured it'd be good to give you time to get used to the area and stuff like that, and the people and the culture here. But tell us about your start with the Forest Service.
Sure. Well, my start with the Forest Service was long coming. I started in high school. I had a very influential teacher that part of an environmental science teacher, and he would take a group of students, like 20 students, out west. And I grew up in Indiana, so I consider myself a transplanted Midwesterner. So, so a group of 20 students from flatlands of Indiana to come out west is quite eye-opening on a number of fronts. And I was fortunate. I saved my hay baling money and was able to attend about 4 trips out west after every year in high school. And we came to Colorado, and we would go backpacking for about 8 days. And then along the way, we would talk with different land management agencies, including the Forest Service, and that really sort of piqued my interest. I grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia, and I was surrounded by mountains there and water, and my family and I, growing up, that's where I got my love for the outdoors, is going camping, going hiking, and whitewater canoeing, that sort of thing. So it was a natural progression, but that really motivated me to come out west. I really don't know what Plan B is ever yet. This has always been my dream. Through college, after my freshman year in college at Purdue and back in Indiana, I would come out west and work all summer for the Forest Service. And I did that on the White River National Forest out of Eagle. I was a volunteer the first year. I saved, again, hay money. And they gave me the greatest cabin to live in next to a lake and paid me a stipend. And that's where I started working for the Forest Service and got my foot in the door. The next year I came back as a seasonal employee and always worked with volunteers. Even at 18, 19, I was in charge of working with volunteers that were twice my age, So it was a little interesting. But I worked seasonally throughout college, and then I decided to change agencies, and I went and worked for the Bureau of Land Management out of Canyon City on the Arkansas River. And that's where I got a real good experience working with Colorado State Parks and jointly managing that river corridor from Leadville down to Pueblo. So that's sort of my background, some of my background. But it took me 10 years almost working seasonally year-round to get on permanently finally. So I'll be working until I'm dead. But yeah, that's how I finally got my first job, and I lived in Montrose for about 3 years. I was an outdoor rec planner there as a permanent employee finally. And then I had the chance to come back to Canyon City and work there as a recreation, lands, and minerals staff there for probably 7 years, something like that. And yeah, that's where I never really thought about being a ranger, honestly. I was happy managing a rec program, a lands program, and oil and gas. And then I started seeing the decisions that were being made and some other folks that were doing the ranger gig, and they inspired me, and I thought I could had more to give in that department. So it took a while to finally get on as a ranger. I back then, opposed to today, there's no deputy rangers available in Colorado back then, so I had to move to get a deputy ranger position in Oregon. I was the deputy district ranger for the Central Coast Ranger District on the coast of Oregon, and part of that was the Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area, and that was a big OHV area, and lots of people, and lots of challenges, of course, and it was also obviously spotted owl habitat and a lot of big timber and a lot of restoration work going on there. So that was invaluable for me to learn all that. And I guess really I was always wanting to work in really busy places, and the Oregon coast was a busy place. I learned a lot there, and I always sort of in the back of my mind realized I needed to get back to Colorado. And I sort of picked and chose my jobs to try to give me the experience necessary to be real competitive for a really good ranger district. So that's sort of my ulterior motive in all that. And as a deputy district ranger, you're not supposed to be a deputy district ranger forever. It's a training opportunity. And about 4 years in Oregon, I moved from one coast to the other. I moved from the Oregon coast to Central Florida. And, my family is really important to me. And our kids were born in Colorado, actually. And we wanted to give them an Eastern experience. And my wife and I both have some ties to the East Coast of America. And we wanted to give our kids that sort of same experience. We weren't really thinking Florida at the time, honestly. But Florida was really good in that it was a huge recreation program there. They have some very outstanding recreation facilities there that are all spring fed, it's like Garden of Eden on earth, and attracts a lot of people. And they also had a huge timber program that we cut a lot of trees for toilet paper, actually. And it was the right thing to do for the environment there, for that ecosystem. There's at least a dozen endemic and endangered species there that needed a lot of disturbance, such as clear cutting the forest, that mimicked the natural fires that would normally happen there.
A little breathing room, so to speak.
Yeah, a little breathing room and new growth. Florida's like a greenhouse, right? So
Mm-hmm.
everything grows back. Otherwise, it would be just get stagnant and decadent, actually. So what Florida also gave me was experience in doing a large-scale prescribed fire. We would burn about 25 to 50,000 acres a year. And again, that was trying to mimic the natural system and mimic the lightning that would occur in Florida. I think Florida and Colorado are 1 and 2 of the most lightning intense areas on Earth. And so anyway, we burned a lot to try to, again, restore the ecosystem and trying to keep that going. The natural fire return interval in Florida was like 2 years. It wanted to burn every 2 years. So
It's a lot more frequent than here.
It's a lot more frequent than here. It varies here from anywhere from as low as like maybe 35 years all the way up to 70 to 150 year burn return interval here. So anyway, yeah. So Florida, again, I was the district ranger on the Ocala National Forest. It was about 380,000 acres, and it was an hour north of Orlando, right in the center of the state. And there was 8.5 to 9 million people within an hour's drive of the district boundary. So we had Orlando, Tampa, Disney World, all those folks just clamoring to get into the national forest and use the national forest. The amount of use was incredible. It makes Colorado Springs look like a piece of cake, you know. But yeah, it was a great experience. I was there for about 6 years, and yeah, when I heard that Oscar was retiring, I definitely, as a previous ranger, I was very interested in this position, and I knew I was going to get back to Colorado somehow. And again, like I said, I am just totally very honored to have this position, and I take it very seriously. And the thing that really motivates me being the ranger here is the people. This town is incredible with the amount of volunteer groups that we have and the partners that we work with. The Forest Service is at its very best when we do projects together in partnership with the public and our other land management partners. The amount of volunteers here in this town is just incredible. I get motivation from people who are passionate about their national forest. So,
great.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a couple questions. You say you're a district ranger, and just so, because people, we deal a lot with this, state parks and things like that. We envision a ranger as being the person out there patrolling the parks and stuff like that. So the Forest Service, the definition of a ranger is a little different. Can you just touch on what the definition of a ranger is when it comes to the Forest Service? Because it's not like a park ranger. It's a little different.
You bet. No, I get that all the time. Tell Lassie I said hello, right? So, no, I'm the district ranger. I am the line officer that's in charge of everything that occurs on the Pikes Peak Ranger District. And this ranger district goes from roughly Cheyenne Mountain all the way up to Palmer Lakes, and then west to Divide, just roughly. And it's like 230,000 acres. And again, my staff and I are charged by Congress, by the public, to manage their national forest. Mm-hmm. And we are a multiple use land management agency. The mission of the Forest Service is to sustain the health, diversity, and productivity of the nation's forests and grasslands, both for this generation and future generation. So that's our mission. It covers a wide variety of resource areas. We manage wildlife, habitat. The state manages the actual critters, but we manage the habitat. We manage range, grazing on national forest. We manage timber. We manage fire. We manage recreation and minerals and oil and gas. So that's sort of our bailiwick. Mm-hmm. And I have a staff of about 60 people right now, and I have a great staff. I learn a lot from them most days, and they are really passionate about their particular resource area, and I'm really proud to serve with them.
Cool. So in the Forest Service, the ranger is actually the land manager for that specific area, as opposed to a park where, a national park or a state park where a ranger is more of a kind of a person on the ground, patrolling the parks and stuff like that. So you're, as the ranger, you did a very good job describing the mission and everything, but you're just the head honcho for this district, I guess is the way to put it.
You bet.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yeah. I've been delegated the responsibility and the authority to manage the Pikes Peak Ranger District from my supervisor, who is the forest supervisor, Diane Trujillo, who is out of our Pueblo office.
Pueblo office.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a couple more questions about your history with the Forest Service. People, my understanding is, have different specialties within the forest. So some are recreation specialists, some are timber specialists, I guess is the best way to put it. When you first started, what was your concentration? Were you doing recreation? Were you doing timber management? Kind of what were you doing when you first started out?
So that's a good question. When I went to school in Indiana, I went to Purdue. I'm traditional. I got a degree in forestry, right? Forest management. That's my background. I also got a degree in outdoor recreation. So I knew I wanted to be able to do both. And I thought I would be more marketable that way, actually. Again, it took me 10 years to get on.
Not an easy gig to get, is it?
Not an easy gig. It's a lot easier now. So, anyway. But no, when I first started, I was mainly in recreation. And I knew I wanted to work with people. And I knew I was sort of different in that I wasn't your traditional forester that wanted to go out in the woods and be one with the trees and do their thing and not deal with the public, right? That's sort of old school. Like I said, I have been successful. The Forest Service has always been successful in partnership with others. So I've always enjoyed working with people, especially if they're excited about their national forest. So no, when I was a wilderness ranger, I cleaned up fire pits. I mapped out campsites in the wilderness and picked up lots of trash. We had a program that was for the physically challenged, and we got people out in the woods and did a lot of interpretation and that sort of thing. So that's sort of where I got my foot in the door. But I started working into lands, and I started issuing lands permits for any time anybody wanted to use the Forest Service for a driveway, a mailbox, a power line. They needed a permit. So I worked with all types of people and all types of companies to make that happen. That's sort of my background. And then, true to Forest Service form, we're all jack of all trades, right? So I got into road management and facility management and trails and wilderness management, and just did a variety of things like that. So yeah, I enjoy being the ranger because, like I said, I get to learn from my staff, and I get to learn all about their particular programs. Our wildlife specialist, he went to school for a number of years, and they know their craft really well, and they've been concentrating on it for their whole career, and I get to learn a little bit about everything. So I enjoy that a lot. Great.
It sounds like you've hit a lot of different functions with the Forest Service, which I'm sure probably primed you pretty well to get into the position you were at. You weren't out there, and like you said, the ranger in a remote district someplace that never sees people and just looking at trees and stuff like that, which I'm sure that's exactly what some people want. But it sounds like with your background, and you were in different areas and you were doing a lot of different things, that probably, especially for this area where you were in Florida with a lot of people, right. You said 6 million people. That I can't imagine that many people. And then you come here, which is not a small town, but a big place, with a lot of emphasis on recreation here, as I'm sure it was in Florida. It sounds like that really primed you well for moving into this position here.
Yeah, I think so. Recreation is a big thing. I think that's part of the reason why I'm here. And in Arkansas River, I mean, that's the second most heavily used river in the United States. So
I had no idea. That's true. Really, I had no idea.
So between recreation here and the timber aspect of it, obviously is not. We can't give away timber here hardly, right. But it's important, and that resource is important. The restoration work of that is really important, and I learned a lot of that from coast to coast, right? So the thing that I would aspire to try to do in the future with my experience in Florida especially is to bring the public along with us in that it would be my hope that we can build some trust with the public and be able to introduce fire back into the ecosystem here in Colorado, and using prescribed fire. So we're burning piles today, actually.
Yeah.
And I know smoke is a big issue and a concern for folks. In Florida, it was not. It was part of the culture there, and it was expected.
People burn in their own backyards and stuff. Probably stuff that we don't allow happen here.
Right. People would burn their own backyards. We would have forest fires in Florida that would not get called in because they thought the Forest Service was just doing a prescribed fire. So that bit us a little bit there.
Yeah.
But here, where it makes sense and under the ideal perfect conditions with the right amount of equipment and people and our partners to help us, we need to start thinking about how to reintroduce fire back into the ecosystem, and with every effort to protect life and property, of course.
We're going to get into talking a little bit about, because we have just a little bit of time today to talk with you, and I just want everybody to get introduced to you and get to know who you were. But we're going to talk a little bit about that, but about plans and what's in store for the future. But you talk about fire, and I just remind people, go look at the when Rampart Range Road reopens this spring, and look at the Waldo Canyon area that burned and how that's rejuvenated and how it's getting healthier as it comes back, where it was just like, unfortunately, a lot of our forest around here very choked, and especially when your ponderosas need a little bit of room and they don't have that room. And you go look at that, at the Hayman fire, which is even longer ago, but a completely different type of fire. It's taking a little longer to come back, but it is coming back too. And it's just interesting to see that regrowth that comes out of that. And you said Florida, you're doing it every few years. Here it's, like you said, 30 years, because it just completely. This is very dry, very wet over there. I'm sure there's a reason.
You bet. No, totally different ecosystems, and I realize that. I realize I'm not in Florida again.
Sure.
And we won't ever hit those type of numbers. But
it's more for we want to try and get the public to understand that, why we do things, why you do things the way you do.
Right. Well, opposed to the Waldo Canyon fire and Hayman fire, those burned really hot.
Right.
When we do prescribed fire, it will be under ideal conditions, and it will grow and burn a lot cooler and have the effect that we want.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, those fires, I don't think like here we had with, they just churned in there and just killed the soil and made them hydrophobic for a number of years and just prolonged the recovery.
Right.
I think it's probably the best way I can describe it. And you're the expert. You know that better than I do.
Right. No, believe me, I actually was here for the Waldo fire.
Oh, okay.
And I worked on those fires. And I was there present when that happened. And, of course, we want to avoid that by all means. So that's what we're trying to get at here.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how that goes. But Congress has some expectations of us in that we're one of the few forests in the United States that have received special funding to do just this type of work, either mechanically or through the use of prescribed fire, to try to reduce the amount of hazardous fuels out there on the National Forest. And I think the Pike San Isabel and the Arapahoe Roosevelt forests received approximately $18 million to split between the two forests last year to try to facilitate this type of work. So, and that's going to be ongoing. And there's some serious expectations along with that money, and that's part of why I think I'm here as well, is trying to implement some of that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I certainly appreciate that Congress has stepped up, and I'm sure that they're looking at the long-term benefits. Putting out a major forest fire like we've had in the western U.S. probably cost many millions of dollars more than just going in and just prescribe, managing it properly so that if there is a fire, it's not so devastating.
Oh, you bet. No, there's all types of ecological benefits as well that are unmeasurable, I'd say.
The Congress seems to focus on dollars.
You bet. No doubt.
Which is okay. It's our money, so it's good that they're trying to find a way to preserve that.
And we're going to try to be really good stewards of that as well.
Good.
There's a lot of reporting and accountability with that, no doubt.
Good. You mentioned briefly that this district has traditionally never had a deputy ranger, but you now have, for I guess the first time ever in this district, have a deputy ranger with you?
Right, I do. Her name is Danielle Carmen, and she's from the Coronado National Forest. And you're right, she's our deputy. She started in September, I believe. And again, I got to help hire her, and she brings to the forest skills that I don't have, and we complement each other pretty well, I'd say. And so no, I really appreciate having a deputy to help manage the workload that we're asked to do here.
I met her a few weeks ago and just had a chance to talk to her very briefly, and my understanding is she has a background with the National Park Service too, is that correct?
She does. She has some experience with the Park Service.
Cool. So kind of more of a recreation kind of thing, I guess.
Recreation thing, but her background is in tribal liaison work as well, and archaeology. So,
Valuable things to have in this area too.
Very, very valuable things to have.
Very cool. Very cool. Carl, like I said, we had just a brief amount of time, and we're going to sit down and talk again. We have that in the works, and the paperwork is being done, and the arrangement being done to have you back on here. But so I wanted to use this opportunity today just to get to people to know who you are, so that when next time we can get down into really meaty subjects about management and things like that. Do you have anything else you want to tell us about your background and how, you seem to cover it really well, and I really appreciate the detail you went into, but is there anything else you want to talk about your background and what brought you here and what makes you the right person for this district?
Well, I think time will tell if I'm the right person for this district, but...
somebody thought you were, they appointed you.
I think so, yes. So, yeah, time will tell. But, no, I think I'm the right person for this district because of my background, like we talked about. And recreation's big here, and I understand that that's really important to folks coming to Colorado Springs, and it's important to me as well. I want to make sure that we continue to provide quality recreational experiences for the public out there. It, along with reducing hazardous fuels in the forest, recreation is also a big priority for us here on the district. And I want folks to enjoy themselves when they're out in the woods. I would ask folks kindly to in that spirit to stay on trails. Quite simply, the amount of off illegal user-created trails out on the National Forest is a problem. It's a problem ecologically. It's a problem with these highly erodible soils that we have, and it's something simple that we can all do. So if people could just simply stay on the official designated signed trails, that would be a huge help. The other thing is, volunteer. Get involved with the community. There is dozens of volunteer groups that we work with routinely. I don't care if you're a hiker or if you're a fisherman or a mountain biker or a motorcycle or a Jeep person, there's a club for you, and we work with them all, and I really enjoy that. So those are some things that, I like to leave you with.
Yeah, great. And most of those groups have, like you said, volunteers, and they're also advocates, and they do work out in the forest, and they work with with Forest Service staff to maintain trails and clean up trails, and a lot of them also promote responsible use. So it's always good if you're not sure what to do. Getting hooked up with one of those groups is always a good way to educate yourself as to, the proper etiquette, I guess is the best way I can put it.
You bet. So, I hope people continue to enjoy their national forest, and I look forward to getting out and exploring myself. There's a lot of trails that I haven't hiked yet. One last thing is I am maybe a little unique in that I ride a mountain unicycle, and I ride that on our trails. I'm not that good, but if you see somebody riding a unicycle around town, that might be me.
I have got to see this on the trail. You have to invite me out next time you go and do that on the trail. I want to see this. I'm on 2 feet, and half the time I'm tripping over something. So I can't imagine me on a unicycle. Yep. Sounds good. Well, Carl, like I said, this is we had just a brief amount of time. I'm glad we got and the listeners get to meet you virtually here and introduce yourself to the community. And we are going to sit down and have a longer chat and discuss more, like I said, the meteor topics. And I'm sure right now people have a bazillion questions. If you have questions you want me to ask Carl, email them to me and we'll see if we can get them all in. But we do have something in the works that we're going to have Carl back on here. Carl, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're incredibly busy, but I appreciate taking the time to talk to me today.
Oh, you bet. No, thank you for the opportunity. And it's getting to enjoy getting to know my new community here.
Excellent. Well, with that, everybody, we'll say thanks for listening to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast.
Before you go, did you know you can rate and review our Studio 809 podcasts? That will help us because our egos really need to have thousands and thousands of listeners. But that helps our wonderful sponsors reach more ears too. And we do love our sponsors. So just go to Studio 809 or any individual 809 podcast in your iTunes or podcast app and click on ratings and reviews. Thanks.